Hi folks, Van Prepper here with another Safe Act and Gun News update. Our first story today is New York State Senator Greg Ball. He was proposing a bill that would allow hunters and fishermen, as they applied for their licenses, to have the opportunity to register to vote. This has nothing to do, this was not a Safe Act thing at all. It was simply an opportunity to register more people to vote. Democrats, when they began to debate this, became so angry and were making this. They were accusing Greg Ball of basically trying to round up all the hunters to get them to vote them out, that they ended up filibustering this essentially by raising so much of a stink that the Republicans just pulled this back. I find this hypocritical and comical at the same time. You can't go to a WIC office, food stamp office, or welfare office, any place that you get public assistance in this state without them offering to register you to vote. And believe me, they'll give you some counseling when they'll say officially they don't, but they're going to steer you on who's giving you those things that you're getting to make sure you vote for the right people. That's okay, because they predominantly vote Democrat. But registering people who are getting hunting and fishing licenses, which are state-issued licenses, that we could never do that, because those people predominantly will not vote Democrat, and that's really what the problem was on this bill. Absolute nonsense, just total garbage. Does it matter if hunters or fishermen are allowed to register to vote when they apply for the license? Probably not, but this was strictly an issue of the Democrats in the New York State Senate being furious and believing that what they were doing, they knew exactly what they had been doing with using these public assistance offices to register people to vote. Those different offices with a different political spectrum, end of the political spectrum group of customers that would be registering people to vote. Just nonsense. Secondly, a Lockport man, Dan Wojden, I hope I didn't butcher the guy's name that bad. You might have heard me talk about this story before. He was riding in a car with his wife. His wife got pulled over for speeding. That was the only issue. The police officer who pulled him over asked, "Is there any weapons in the car?" He said, "Yes, there's a 9mm handgun. It's in the glove compartment, and in the console is my handgun permit." So they had him get out. They checked his permit, checked the gun, and that's where it should have ended legally. That was all that they had grounds to check. Then they popped the magazine out and began to count out the bullets, and they charged this guy with what would amount to a felony. They charged this guy because he had 10 bullets loaded in his magazine. And the silliest part of this is that even after a federal judge ruled a month or so later that the 7-round limit was arbitrary, unenforceable, and essentially unconstitutionally threw that 7-round limit out, which means this guy hasn't done anything wrong at all, they pursued the charges because, let's face facts, municipalities totally unable to admit that they made a mistake and just drop charges. They have to, they have to attack and defend their own, and it's just nonsense. At what point would a logical person go, listen, I guess I didn't really have the right or the grounds to look into that magazine. I probably shouldn't have done that. And they ended up making a huge deal out of it. Anyway, the judge gets a hold of this. It gets into court, and the judge said, that's unconstitutional. You have no legal right under the 4th Amendment of the United States, which protects this man against unreasonable searches and seizures, to look in that magazine and count the bullets. You don't. It doesn't matter. You have a right to secure the firearm, and that's where your inspection stops. You can pop the magazine out, make sure there's nothing loaded in that firearm, make sure it's a firearm that's on its permit, but you are not allowed to count the bullets. It doesn't matter if it's readily obvious to you. You have no right to count the bullets in that gun. So he threw the charges out. So awesome job to that judge. I'm very happy with that. That's very comforting news for those of us who are walking around with more than 7 rounds loaded in our firearms now, because now if we get pulled over, we at least have some pretty good precedent in this state that if they count the bullets in our magazines and there's more than 7, and for some reason they seem to still be enforcing the 7-round limit, even though a federal judge said it's arbitrary and unconstitutional, then we probably don't have to worry about it if I go to court. That's comforting for me anyway. And finally, I have Connecticut. Now, I'm a couple of days late on this story, but for those of you who don't remember, the Connecticut, they were like the poster childs for gun registration. They had those pictures all over on the news of these long lines of people going to registering. Well, it turns out that they registered somewhere between 4 and 15% of estimated assault weapons and illegal magazines were registered. So they were embarrassed by this, and they really didn't want the hassle of having to go around, and they don't want to confiscate if they can avoid it. They don't want to be embarrassed and admit that nobody's obeying their stupid law that's unconstitutional. So they gave them a grace period. They said, we're going to give you an amnesty for those who didn't register. Come in and register now, and we'll, even though it's past the deadline, and everything's going to be okay. Well, some people did go in to register late. Why? I have no idea, but they did. And even though they were told they had this amnesty period, some people went in during the amnesty period where their registrations were accepted, and some were not. And there are now letters prepared that say, whether there's no official thing that they're going to send these out, but there are letters prepared that say that your registration was not accepted because it came in after the deadline, even though they said they were giving them a grace period. And those registrations now are going to be used as a means to know for sure these people have weapons that are not registered, and they're illegal. So there is talk of confiscation in Connecticut. For those of you who do not believe that registration leads to confiscation, first off, you're wrong and you're an idiot, and you don't know anything about history. And secondly, I would offer up this as an example, and I would offer up this New York City, where New York City has on at least 2 occasions had people register certain types of firearms that were legal, decided later they weren't legal, and then went to their house and took their guns away from them. So registration always, always, always leads to confiscation. And for those of us watching from outside the state of Connecticut, this is a scary, scary thing. Because if the citizens of Connecticut refuse to surrender those weapons, you're going to see some armed conflict. And then every one of us is going to have a choice to make. Every single one of us. What are you going to do? Because if we allow them to go state by state, they'll just go state by state. The feds will send in people, and they will go state by state by state, and they'll do it one state at a time because they can handle one state at a time, and they will just confiscate weapons one state at a time. This is nonsense. I'm not advocating anything. I'm not telling anybody to do anything like that. Go to Connecticut, whatever. I'm just saying that this is a frightening situation, and each one of us has to make a choice on what we are or are not willing to do to help our brothers and sisters, or do we sit around and wait until this comes to our doorstep and somebody's knocking on our door and taking away the things that we have that are constitutionally guaranteed. So I'm Van Prepper. I hope you enjoyed this update. This has been another Safe Act and Gun News update. Happy shooting, everybody.